Tevis, Tavshin Lamed Daled, and the Rebbe is going to combine something from our Parsha and the end of Chanukah, which is, or Chanukah B'chlal, which today is, we're at the last moments of the Yom Tov of Chanukah. Vigash Eiliv Yehuda ויאמר Adoini, and Yehuda approached Yosef, we have this right away at the beginning of our Parsha, and he said, please, my master. It's known the matter that this indicates in a person's service to Hashem. From the very fact that the pasuk relates all the details of this conversation between Yehuda and Yosef, and not only does it relate all the details of the conversation, but also and also what prefaced it, what brought about this conversation between Yehuda and Yosef. Moving, it's understood. Shazoi Parsha Kloli. So this is a general, all-inclusive Torah portion, meaning it has great significance. There is a primary and core lesson and directive in the service of every single Yid for the duration of his life. So to be able to understand it, according to what's written in the Zohar, that the approach of Yehuda to Yosef is corresponding to the halacha that after one says Gal Yisrael, one must immediately begin Shemona Esra, the Amidah prayer. We're not supposed to interrupt between Gal Yisrael and the Amidah. This is called, in the terminology of Chazal, Geula has to be brought close to Tefillah. Tefillah, in the terminology of Chazal, is referring to Shemona Esra, the Amidah, and Geula is talking about the bracha Gal Yisrael. What's the significance of Geula being close to Tefillah, and what does it have to do with Yehuda and Yosef? Yehuda is from the word giving thanks and also admitting and acceptance. The idea Shu'inyan Tefillah. That's the idea of davening, like it says B'kriyas Shmoishal Yehuda. As far as calling the name of Yehuda, that Leah called him Yehuda because Hapam Oidas Hashem. Now I will thank Hashem. Now I will admit and accept Hashem. Yosef Huinin Geula. Yosef is the idea of redemption. If he will, it says in the story of Rus that when Boaz went to the closest relative and asked if he will redeem you, is good, or according to some explanations, if Toiv, the person called Toiv, will redeem you. The main thing is that we see from that pasuk that spiritually Geula and Toiv and the word Toiv are associated with each other. The Yosef in Yoni Toiv, Yosef is also the idea of good, and therefore, since Geula is associated with Toiv, and Yosef is the idea of Toiv, so Yosef and Geula are identical. And the Rebbe explains what's the connection between Yosef and Toiv. Heim bepashtos, both in the simple sense. Shuhu amajbil chol ha'ma'aretz. He was the one that sustained and gave food to all the nations and the entire nation of the land, of the earth. So therefore, he is literally Toiv. He's good. He's giving. Also, according to Kabbalah, Yosef is associated with Toiv. Kiyadu, as it's known, Yosef who spheres hayisoid. Yosef is corresponding to the sphere of Yisoid, the second sphere before Malchus. It's responsible for all matters of goodness to come down into Malchus. It's like a hinge, it's like a linchpin. It joins the spheres higher than Malchus to bring it all down into Malchus. And then through Malchus, all the goodness of the spheres above it come down to the entire chain order of descent, following it, that are following it in the worlds of Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So therefore, the sphere of Yisoid, which corresponds to Yosef, is also the idea of Toiv. So we see Toiv has to do with Geula, and therefore, when it says that Yosef is the level of Toiv, the level of Sphere Yisod, it has to do with Geula. So now, based on all of that, we just finished the brackets. What it says in our parsha that Yehuda approached him, meaning Yehuda approached Yosef to Yosef. It's the bringing close, it's the joining, it's the non-interruption between Geula and Tefillah. Now, analyzing this further, from the fact that Yehuda approached Yosef, Yehuda being Tefillah, and Yosef being Geula. So Yehuda is approaching Yosef. Yosef is the master, and Yehuda is approaching him. In that, taking it, looking at it from that way, it seems that redemption, Geula, is higher than davening. Because Yosef, whose aspect is redemption, was higher than Yehuda, that its matter was davening. Therefore, Yehuda was beholden to and had to approach Yosef because Yosef indicated the idea of Geula, which was higher. Yet, despite that, Avol became from the exact language. If you analyze the language of the Chazal and also the Zohar, where it speaks about Geula being brought close to Tefillah, not bringing Tefillah close to Geula, which is the way we're speaking about in our parsha, that Yehuda, which is Tefillah, approached Yosef. Mashmet indicates that there is an advantage and a quality in davening over Geula. Initially, there is the first step, Gal Yisrael. There is the idea of Geula, redemption. And afterwards we come to the idea of Tefillah that's higher than it. This is the way we actually do it every day in Shacharis. Gal Yisrael, after concluding with the bracha Baruch Ato Hashem, Gal Yisrael, Maschila Tefillah Bamiris Hashem Sosei Tiftar. The davening begins with saying, Hashem, please open up my lips. It's part of the it's considered a long tefillah. It's part of the tefillah of Shemoneh Esrei. Even the word Adnai is from the word Adon, a master. What's our relationship with the master? It's acceptance. It's bittul. So that is the way it is in actuality in davening, that tefillah is higher. But over here in our parsha it says that Yehuda approached him. Yehuda approached Yosef. Yosef, who is the idea of redemption, is higher than Yehuda, which is all about, which is the idea of davening, like we said before. So there's one more point that in many other Mamorim he brings in, and that is also in the Haftorah. In the Haftorah he speaks about as well that there is the combination of Yehuda and Yosef, that there will not be any more separate Shvatim, but there will be that Yehuda and Yosef will rejoin the way it was, instead of the division of the 10 tribes separate from the 2 tribes that were led by respectively Yosef and Yehuda. So they will be rejoined when Mashiach comes. That's read in the Nevuah and the Haftorah of this week's Parsha. But over there, we see the actual ascendancy. We see that actually Yehuda is higher, because he concludes, but who will be the leader over them? Yehuda will be the leader over all the Shvatim that are joined together. So we even see between the Parsha and Chumash versus the Haftorah that flips around. In our Parsha, it's Vayigash Yehuda to Yosef. Yehuda was subservient to Yosef, which means also Tefillah is not as high as Yosef, which is davening. In the Haftorah, which is going to talk about Mashiach's times, we see the opposite, that it's Yehuda is primary, and Yosef is subservient. Yosef, which is Geula, is subservient and only leads up to the level of Yehuda, the level of Tefillah. And we're going to explain that that's the difference between, later on the Maimer, we're going to explain it's the difference between the present day versus Mashiach's times. But before we speak about that, we're going to talk about in Ois Beis the connection with Chanukah. The Yuvim Bahagdim will be understood by prefacing. This parsha is read in close proximity to Chanukah. In other words, it's read in Shul. I mean, Chumash we already started during Chanukah. This understood that the general idea that's explained in our topic about Vigash, Elav, Yehuda is associated with Chanukah, like the Rebbe brings down from the Shalah, that the Shalah says that the Yom Tovim that come out in a certain week have to do with the parsha that it's being read that week. The idea behind this is the Chanukah candle, the mitzvah is to place it on the left side of the doorway, facing the mezuzah. And the Gemara explains why in that location. In general, we do everything when it comes to mitzvahs, almost always it has to do with the right. We always give more importance to the right, which is the stronger one, versus the left, which is the weaker one. Why all of a sudden over here, when it comes to Chanukah candles, do we put it on the left side? So there's an overriding reason. What's the overriding reason? So that the mezuzah should be on the right and the Chanukah candle should be from the left, so that ensures that the person going through the doorway or in the doorway will be like surrounded by mitzvahs. But Chassidus explains there is an interplay between the two. It's not just, okay, we have the mezuzah on the right, so we have no choice. We got to put the mezuzah, the Chanukah on the left. But what mezuzah represents and what Chanukah represents has to do the right versus the left, as the mimer will go on to explain. You mean the right who in an ashpa chesed. That's the idea of giving, kindness. That's what the idea of the right hand, the Chassidus and Kabbalah is always about, stretching out and sharing and giving. Indicating a drawing down from above to below. The smile and the idea of the left, who in halom, that's the idea of ascending and elevating from below to above. Like the expression of the pasuk, that Hashem's left is under my head. What is the idea of under? It's a very strange expression. What does it mean, under the head? Usually you place something under a hand if you want to lift up what's in the hand or what the hand is supporting. The left, Kaviyachol Vashem, elevates the head of Klal Yisrael. So we see that the left is about elevation, whereas the right is about drawing down, descent from above to below. That's the idea that the mezuzah is on the right. Mezuzah corresponds to the general idea of Torah mitzvahs, because the Rebbe in other places brings down that the entire Torah mitzvahs was compared to the mezuzah. So he's going to explain in two ways is it going to indicate in Torah mitzvahs, and from both the Torah perspective and the mitzvah perspective, it's yemin, it's right, it's coming down from above to below. Because Torah's idea is drawing down from above to below. Since it's the word of Hashem, behold, my words are like fire. So it's Hashem's words coming down here. Hashem is communicating to us. That's Hashem influencing and sharing with us in a way of the right. Mitzvahs, and so too mitzvahs are also from above to below. We know that all mitzvahs are corresponding to and embodied in tzedakah. Tzedakah is called in the Yerushalmi mitzvah. When it just says mitzvah without saying what mitzvah we're referring to, it's going on tzedakah, because tzedakah is representative of all mitzvahs. And of course, tzedakah is about the right and giving. The idea of giving life and kindness, which chesed is actually a combination of two parts. It could be oisius ches, chos, and daled. It is chos of chesed, means having mercy and compassion, And Dalid is the word that's someone that's dal, someone that's poor. Leman de lesle megarbe klum, someone that has nothing of their own. So that's the idea of chesed. Chesed is the giving to someone who has nothing. So that shows on drawing down from above to below, the idea of tzedakah. Shekolzo b'kavi yamin, all of this is in the line of the right. As we know, the Chazal say, the Yamin Mekareves, the job of the right is to bring close, meaning it's the idea of Chesed and Hashpah and giving. Avol near Chanukah Mismoel, but the Chanukah candles on the left. Because the idea of the candle of Chanukah is the ascent. And that's as much as he shares about Chanukah right now. Now he's going to go back to the general idea in Torah mitzvahs, and he's going to explore some more about this two-directional aspect, the above to below versus below to above, the right line versus the left line, and he's going to explore it in not just idea of the mitzvahs in general, which is the mezuzah versus Ner Chanukah, but in Torah mitzvah itself, there's Torah versus mitzvahs, and in Torah itself, and Torah mitzvahs versus davening, he's going to explore all these melmaila lamata versus melmata lamaila. These two aspects, these are the two types of traveling that there is. Melmaila lamata, there's going from above to below, or melmata lamaila, from below to above. That's the difference between when we take Torah mitzvahs in general, it's as we mentioned before, it's going from above to below. Like we said, Hashem spoke to us, and all mitzvahs corresponds to tzedakah, it's giving, versus davening is traveling from below to above. As we know, davening is indicated by the idea of a ladder in Yaakov's dream. Like it says, Sulam, a ladder that's standing on the ground and its head is reaching the heavens, which indicate the level of davening. So we see davening is about going from below to above. Now the Rebbe is going to break it down further. Even though he said Torah mitzvahs on one side, tefillah on the other side, now he's going to say, in Torah mitzvah itself, we can divide it as well. Pratis Yosef, more specifically, being Torah mitzvahs, this is the difference between Torah mitzvahs, Torah in Yonam Shochem Mailamata. Torah's point is about drawing down from above to below. This is also the idea that Torah study has to be done in a way that I go with broadness. In other words, I'm in expansive mode during Torah study. With passion, with excitement. In other words, a person is fully, very expansive. Like the expression of the Zohar about Torah study, to increase it. That is all, shows on drawing down from above to below, expansiveness, givingness, going in all directions. Mitzvahs, as opposed to the action of mitzvahs, the word maisa indicates the opposite of expansiveness. Maisa indicates more of like internalization and restriction. In Chazal, there's a very interesting expression that says that when it talks about the community for coercing someone to give tzedakah, a member of the community, so the term is me'asin ala tzedakah. Ma'asin from the same word like maisa, action, meaning that maisa is related to the word of coercion, ba'ofen shel kfiyah dafka, specifically in a manner of coercion. That indicates malmata l'maylo. The person is like constricting himself and taking his own ego and self out of the equation, and he rises above the world and above himself. Like it's brought down the Sefer HaTeres Rosh in the middle of Rebbe, in mitzvahs, there is a specific intention that every mitzvah can have, especially those that are familiar with Kabbalah, and a specific characteristic and assistance that every mitzvah has. And then there's a general intention. What's the general intention? Va'ikar, the primary thing of the mitzvahs is not the individual kavanah, the individual intention. Loya kavanah pratis, ela kavanah klal is the general intention. What is the general intention? That's the common denominator that one has to have in any mitzvah one fulfills. That's what it says in the expression of the brachas of the mitzvahs. Asher kiddeshanu v'mitzvos v'tzivonu, the one who sanctified us with his mitzvahs and commanded us. That's what has to be the main intention in any mitzvah. Its entire being is that he's fulfilling the command of Hashem. So that is, again, it's about my constriction, my elevation. It's not about my interests and so on. It's about ascending. So too in davening. That's from below to above. There's the general intention that a person needs to know before whom is standing, in addition to all the specific intentions one has to have during davening. Also, there's the specific intention in every single bracha and Shemoneh Esrei. There is specific meaning and intention behind it. But in general, the Shemoneh Esrei can be divided into the introductory brachas versus the center brachas, which is the actual brachas of requests. In this, there's a difference between the first three brachas to the rest of the brachas Shemoneh Esrei, or the 12 following brachas, the center brachas Shemoneh Esrei, and that the first three brachas must be done with the intention and the understanding, I'm standing before Hashem. And if a person doesn't have that intention, technically, theoretically, he would have to say over Shemoneh Esrei if in the beginning of Shemoneh Esrei he didn't have in mind that he's davening to Hashem. But nowadays, the halacha is that, practically speaking, we do not begin davening again if a person was lacking this general intention in the first three brachas. Because we're worried that you don't have intention the first time around, you may say it again and still not have intention. Well, whatever it is, you need to have the general intention. You should know before whom you're standing. And that's the primary thing that a person has to be aware that he's speaking to Hashem. If he doesn't have any awareness that he's speaking to Hashem, so then his entire tefillah is nullified. The meaning of davening is that you're speaking to Hashem. That's the general difference between the idea of Torah that's from above to below to the idea of the actions of mitzvahs and davening, that primarily it's about the person's acceptance and nullification, which is about rising from below to above. Yet, though in general, these are two types of traveling. Each one of them has its unique and specific time. In other words, there's a time when you're supposed to daven, there's a time when you're supposed to learn, there's a time when you're supposed to be doing mitzvahs. Even more specifically, in every matter in holiness, there's in the general way, and also the way it's divided into details. So therefore, even though we made a distinction and we said Torah is from above to below, mitzvahs and davening is from below to above, in each one of them you could find both directions as well. Yesh b'inyan Torah gufa, there's to be found in Torah itself. Not only what's being drawn down from above to below, also the ascent from below to above. V'chein b'inyan atfila gufa, and so too concerning davening itself. Yesh loirak inyan ha'alom l'mata l'mayl. There's not only the ascent from below to above, elagam inyan amshachim l'mayl l'mata, also the drawing down from above to below, and that is, as we will also have Bi Adoini in the next piece. We're going to find how in davening there's also the level of Bi Adoini, and we've had this conversation in other Mamorim. So I'll leave it to those other Mamorim when we discussed some of these also more in detail. So now bring it back to the approach of Yehuda to Yosef and determining which is greater and which is subservient to whom. Is Yehuda, which is Tefillah, higher than Geula, or is Geula, which is Yosef, higher than Yehuda, who Yehuda approached Yosef? Vigash Elav Yehuda. This is the idea that Yehuda approached him. Not Tefillah, that in general it's the idea of davening. Kanal Shagosh is Yehuda li Yosef in Yonas Michas Gula Tefillah, like we said before, that the approach of Yehuda to Yosef is that Geula has to be close to davening with protis Yosef, more specifically yesh b'zeh in Yonah. There are two components of here. Aleph Vayigash Elav Yehuda shu inyan alam mata l'mayla. That Yehuda approached. That's the idea of ascending from below to above. Yehuda was like approaching someone that's higher than him, so he was like ascending. Va'beis Vayomer bi Adoini. And the second one was that he said, Bi Adoini. Bi Adoini, again, Rashi explains Bi is from the word please. It's a form of request, a bakasha. But Chassidus brings a deeper meaning in Bi. What's the literal translation of the word Bi? In me. And also Bi is a numerical equivalent of Yud Beis. Let's see it inside. He said, Bi Adoini shu inyan amshachim al ma'il. It's drawing down from above to below. Like Tzemach Tzedek explains in the Torah. The approach of Yehuda to Yosef, that's the three first barachas of Shemoneh Esrei that we said is a different category than the next 12. The Chazal call it arranging the praise of the king, or of Hashem. Just like before you're about to place a request before a king, you have a certain expressions of praise that you give the king. The same thing, before we are about to ask our different requests in Shemoneh Esrei that begins from Atachoinen, that begins from the fourth bracha in Shemoneh Esrei, the first three brachas are praising Hashem. So that's praising Hashem, that's going to be more about ascending. We are rising to Hashem. Afterwards it says, Bi Adoini. Bi hainu yud beis emtsois. B is the same numerical equivalent to Gematria, the same letters as Yud Beis, 12 middle brachas. And what's the purpose of the 12 middle brachas? They are things that I need. I'm trying to get Hashem to give me certain things. Through the 12 middle brachas in Shemoneh Esrei, we affect an influence that should come down from above to below. So we have the below to above at the beginning of Shemoneh Esrei, and that's Vayigash Elav Yehuda, and then you have the Bi Adoini, you have the Hamshachim al Mailamat. Yehuda. And the Tzemach Tzedek also explains what it says that Yehuda approached him. Why did I have to say him? He could have said, or to him, could have said, Vayigash Yehuda. We know what's going on over here. So Yehuda approached. Why is it Elav Daika, specifically Elav? Yehuda higir kiviyachol b'chinas b'chol kareinu Elav. Had Yehuda reached to the level that it says, and all who call to him, skip the parentheses, mamish to him. In other words, that this is a davening that we mamish reach Hashem himself. Skip the next parentheses as well. So he says, after the period, the idea behind this is, in general, the ascent of davening happens through malachim and other intermediaries. It says that the malachim embrace and hug the words of davening that a yid utters, and they kiss the word of davening, and through that they refine the words and help it go upwards. This is why we see in the ladder of Yaakov's dreams that malachim went up and malachim went down. The job of the malachim went up is to help the tefillas go upwards. But that need for the malachim to purify and elevate our words of davening is an ordinary davening. But if we have the level of Yehuda in davening, then there's no need for that. Then Vigash Elav, we go direct to Hashem. Amnam kasher inyan atfilu boy from the Vigash Yehuda. But if the manner of davening is in the way that Yehuda approached, Yehuda b'chlal, we not bittul Yehuda in general's idea of bittul, ukedichsiv, like it says, v'tamid miledes. It says by Leah after she gave birth to Yehuda, it says she stopped giving birth. Which is, by the way, a strange thing because it doesn't say by anyone else that she stopped giving birth. By Yehuda, it makes a point, stop giving birth. And there's reasons, Midrashim speak about it, but still stands out. What's the idea of a tamid miladas? And they use the word to stop, they use the word tamid from the word amida. Shu inyan habitol that filas amida. Yehuda engendered vatamid miladas, the bittul of the amida tamid, the standing still. Befrat kisha bittul Yehuda ba'ifn vayigash, especially when the bittul of Yehuda, which Yehuda already indicates bittul, is in the way of he approached. Approaching indicates again recognizing the sovereignty of someone higher than you. Shemoid al tachas bittul, it indicates the ultimate state of bittul. So then it becomes Elav. When there's Vayigash and Yehuda, the ultimate combination of bittles, then it becomes Elav directly to Hashem. So then we reach immediately, without any need for any intermediaries, to Hashem mamish kiviyachol. How come? Why does bittul engender this? The field shemorim v'kadosh eshkoin as daka v'shval ruach davke. It says that though I dwell exalted and high, but I'm specifically with those that are low and crushed and low of spirit. In other words, Hashem has a special connection with those that are bottom. And that Vayigash Elav Yehuda, which we say is indicative of the first three brachos of Shemoneh Esrei. When a person has the first three brachos of Shemoneh Esrei in such a way of this complete bittul of Vayigash and Yehuda, so then the next part of the pasuk becomes fulfilled. Bi Adoini, Vaydeze Nasis Gam Amshochem Omayel. Then it comes also the drawing down from above to below. Bi Adoini, in me. Literally, bi means in me, in the literal. It should come down from above to below to me. Yud Beis Bi Brachas Emtzoy is the 12, which is numerical equivalent of B, of the center brachas. Shal Yodam Nimshom B'chinas Adoini, from them, that through them comes down from the level of my master, L'loy Mutzoyim, again. It comes down not through any need for intermediaries, because malachim in general are delivery systems, delivery people. They both act, the literal meaning of the word malach, as we know, is a shliach, a messenger. So they act as a delivery vehicle for brachas to come down here and for other or missions of Hashem down here, and they also act as a delivery person to raise up our tefillos above. But in a case of bittul, there's no need for any delivery systems. Our tefillos go directly to Hashem, and the same thing, the brachas come directly down from Hashem to us. This is also the idea of Yehuda approaching Yosef, which we said, seemingly it means that Yosef, which is Geula, is higher than Yehuda, which is Tefillah. How does that fit? Yosef Yehuda in Yonim Talmud mel Mailamato or Maisa mel Mailo. If you remember earlier in the Mimer, we said Torah is going from above to below. It's Hashem's voice and Hashem's word speaking to us. And action, mitzvahs, is about ascending from above to below. And that is what Yosef is about: learning, Torah study, and Yehuda is about action. And he's going to explain why. Where do we see this in Yosef and Yehuda? Ki Yosef, Lashon Tosefes Chulu. Yosef is from the word addition, an increase. Ki D'chsiv Yosef Havaya Li Ben Acher, that Hashem should add to me another son. That's why he's called Yosef. Shehu B'chinas Tzemeach, that shows on the level of growth and increase, which is the whole idea of Torah. We said before, to increase and grow and make the Torah grow and increase. Yehuda, as opposed to Yehuda, Yehuda is about standing still, being in a state of nullification. That's the level of below the vegetation. It's the level of inanimate. To note also what it's brought down in the Torah of the Alter Rebbe on this week's parsha Vigash Elav. It says concerning the beams of our house is made of cedar, meaning the Beis Hamikdash is made of cedar. What does that mean? Not the entire Beis Hamikdash, but just the beams that are embedded in the walls. This is also the difference between the Mishkan to the Beis Hamikdash. That the Beis Hamikdash was made out of stones. That even the roof of the Beis Hamikdash was made out of stones. The kolshke naksolim, how much more so, the walls were made out of stones. Stones are inanimate, inorganic. As opposed to the Mishkan was made of cedar. The walls were made of the cedar boards, the karashim. Bechinas hatzameach, which was things that were from the vegetation. V'amichse, and the covering was an even higher level of creation. Mirias izim v'chulu. It was from sheets and curtains made out of the skins of goats. So that indicates growth, increase. You start off from wood and you increase and you grow up to the top when you reach already the level of Chai, of the living creatures. That's like Yosef. Yosef is increasing. Beis Hamikdash, which was entirely made of inanimate things, was in the portion of Yehuda. That Yehuda, which is about standing still in Bittul, is the level of the inanimate. So therefore, the Beis Hamikdash was in his location. Mishkan Shiloi, and Mishkan Shiloi, which preceded the Beis Hamikdash, Bechinas HaTzemeach, which the Mishkan still has to do with the idea of Tzemeach, the growing things, B'chalke Shel Yosef, that are in the portion of Yosef, Tzemeach v'doimim and bedugmas Talmud Maisa, growing things, and the vegetation versus the inanimate versus stones and so on are similar to Torah study and action. And that's the difference that we were talking about in the whole Maimer. Malmaila lamata, malmata lamaila, expansion versus bittul. Now we're going to explain about who approaches who, and who is more important than who. That in the parsha it seems to indicate it's Yehuda approached Yosef, that Yosef is higher. And on the other hand, we know that it's smichas geula l'tfilah, that the geula, which is corresponding to Yosef, is subservient to and supposed to lead to davening, which is higher. Concerning Torah study and action. In other words, Torah versus mitzvahs, yes, that there's a dispute. Im Talmud, God like Maisa, God, if Torah study is greater or action is greater. And they took they took a vote and they came to the decision that Torah study is greater. Abnam yet in Talmud God this idea that Torah study is greater, which is about the special advantage of drawing down from above to below, that's only in the present time. Now, before Mashiach. But when Mashiach comes, action will be greater. Then it will become revealed the great advantage and quality of action. The action is the avoid that we said before of ascending from below to above. And in a similar vein, so to concerning Yosef and Yehuda, that their idea represents, what they represent is Torah study versus action. In these days, that Yosef is greater. That's why it says that Yehuda approached Yosef and he asked, bring it down into me. The Yehuda al Yosef, it's the ascent of Yehuda to Yosef, because Yosef is primary now. Torah study is primary now. But even to allow that this should be this ascent of Yehuda to Yosef, we need to have what's called, we need to have an inspiration from above to be able to bring about the inspiration from below. So even before our ascent from below to above, which is Yehuda, we also need beforehand to be empowered from above. As it's known, like it's known concerning that Hashem tells a person that, let's say, demand payment for whatever he did for Hashem. So Hashem tells him, who preceded me that I should pay him? Meaning that the Chazal say it in a very simple way. You want to tell me, you did such a great mitzvah, you shook lulav and esrog on Sukkot. But who gave you the lulav and esrog? Who created the lulav and esrog? You blew shofar. Who gave you the shofar? Who made the shofar possible? Who created the world so you should be able to do the mitzvahs? In other words, spiritually, this means any inspiration down here from below that we do had to be preceded by an inspiration from above, by Yisrus D'Le'elo. That's also the idea of go, my beloved, towards the Kala. The Kala is generally referring to Knesset Yisrael. The Jewish people are considered Hashem's bride. Doidi, my beloved, is considered Hashem. So before there is the marriage and the ascent of the bride to her groom, to the Hashem, there has to be L'cha Doidi. First, the groom has to go towards the Kala. So to be able to be the ascent of the Kala, the first has to be the revelation and the drawing down of my beloved. This is also the bringing close of Geula to Tefillah, which is the Geula, even though Geula is higher than davening, like we said, at present at least, but we need the empowerment of Geula, which the Geula shows on the Hamshachim U'Mayla Mata. Shezeu HaKoyach. That is the power and capability. Hanimshach U'Mayla comes down from above. That through that we can come to the level of Yehuda, we can come to the ascent of davening. Still in all, it uses the expression not bringing davening close to Geula, but bringing Geula close to davening. That indicates on the quality and advantage of davening. Because the idea of redemption is only the empowerment for the ascent of davening. The ultimate intention is the ascent of tefillah itself. Then it is much higher in its level. And this higher level of davening will become revealed when Mashiach comes. Here he actually makes reference to what I mentioned earlier, that when Mashiach comes, Yehuda will be higher than Yosef. Just like when Mashiach comes, action, we said before, is going to be primary and greater. Like it says in this week's Haftarah, that David, my servant, meaning the representative of Yehuda, will be a leader over them forever. Forever. It'll be in a constant way without changes. That's also the idea of Yehuda. Al Shem Vatamid Miledes. Vatamid Miledes means stopping giving birth is also indicative not just of physically not giving birth more, but it's going to stop any type of change. This is the final thing. Yehuda is all there is. Now it's the final thing, the advantage of Malmata Lamaila, the below to above, the advantage of mitzvahs, the advantage of action, the advantage of Yehuda, and that's going to be the whole level of Mashiach's times.